This is the seventh tranche in the ongoing commentary of Aristotle's Metaphysics. And let's look at the essential and accidental properties. The distinction between essential and accidental properties is one of the most valuable innovations of Aristotle's first philosophy. The theory of substance depends heavily on the possibility of defining the essence of a substance. A substance essence or essential properties are the properties that are necessary to its existence. If a substance is derived of any of its essential properties, then, according to Aristotle, it ceases to exist as that object or as an object of the precisely specified kind. In this video, we analyze Aristotle's distinction between essence and accident, and in the following we try to explain Aristotle's interpretation of essence and the essential properties in terms of natural functions. Essential properties, as the term indicates, are essential. It's good as saying that it is vital to a substance. An entity cannot persist, survive, or preserve its identity through changes involving the elimination of any of its essential properties. Accidental properties, by contrast, are those that an object has only by chance. It is accidental to a woman that she must be musically talented, since some women are musical and others are not. A person does not become a woman by virtue of acquiring the ability to make music, nor does she cease to be a woman if she should somehow not be able to play music. On the other hand, to appeal to one of Aristotle's favorite examples, if it is essential to a human being to be capable of reasoning, then reasoning, unlike musical ability, cannot be subtracted from a person without the person ceasing to exist as a human being, even if not being totally destroyed. Whatever is left behind from such a devastating change, it is anyway not a human being if reasoning is an essential human property. Aristotle, accordingly, distinguishes between two kinds of change. One type of change affects only a substance's accidental properties. Changing, say, from being musical to being unmusical, is a mere alteration through which an entity persists, surviving the change as an existent thing with its identity intact. The other type of change affects a substance's essential properties. Such a change destroys the substance in a drastic elimination of its essence. The substance is that, in that case, is not merely altered, but altogether annihilated, in a kind of change that Aristotle speaks of as corruption, in contrast, of course, to generation. He draws the distinction between essential and accidental properties in this section that you have in front of you from 1007 Alpha. Let's read this one in the Penguin edition on page 92. We put the question without qualifications, but our opponent in replying adds the contradictories. But this just means that he is not, in fact, replying to the question at all. For on these assumptions, there is nothing to stop man, white, and endlessly many other things being the same. No, we must insist that to the question whether it is true that a given object is or is not a man, an answer that means a single thing must be returned. We cannot accept the addition of, say, it is also white and large. It is indeed impossible to go through all such accidental properties of the object, and we are quite entitled to insist that our opponent add all or none. And it follows in exactly parallel style that even if the same thing is in 1,000 ways, both man and not man, it is still not acceptable as a part of reply to question whether or not it is a man, to add that it is also simultaneously not a man, unless the respondent is prepared to add all the other accidental properties to which the entity either is or is not. To attempt this last project would be to drop off the map of philosophical debate. My quotation ends here for now. Or we can continue. A more general complaint can be also raised. It is that the adoption of this theory carries with it the elimination of substance and essence. In effect, it commits you to saying that all properties are accidents and that there's nothing which it is to be a man or an animal. For suppose that there is something which it is to be a man, this will not be to be a non-man or not to be a man. After all, there was a single thing that man meant, to wit the substance of a certain thing. And to have the substance of a certain thing as meaning is to have the meaning that nothing else than that is what it is to be that thing. If, however, in the present case, to be a man just is either to be a non-man and not to be a man, then it will be something else other than what it is to be a man. And that is why this position ends up saddled with the consequence that there cannot be a proprietary account of this kind of anything. Hence, all properties are accidents, given that it is in terms of a proprietary account that we draw the distinction between substance and accident. So the white is an accidental property of a man in as much as the man is white, but is not what it is to be white. In much the same way that the concept of substance is systematically ambiguous in Aristotle's first philosophy, so is the distinction between essence and accident. The two distinctions unavoidably go together because the identity conditions for a substance are nothing other than the substance's essential properties together with its accidental properties. And as substances, accidental properties are defined relative to and in contrast with its essential properties. Thus, maybe in the discussion box below, if you're taking this course in the online class, maybe it's worth answering, how can we tell without actually destroying a substance whether any of its properties is essential or merely accidental? Please answer that. Thus, going back to this example in front of you in the Penguin edition, A human being, as essentially a rational animal, is identifiable as such in persisting through a change from being long-haired to short-haired after a trip to the barber and the like. Relative to the supposed essence of a man being as a rational animal, the property of being long-haired or short-haired and the contrariety long-haired, short-haired is purely accidental. If you have long hair and get it cut, you do not cease to be a human being. Nor if you start out with short hair and let it grow long. Having short hair, on the other hand, is relative to the more specific essence of being a short-haired human being, or more generally to that of a being short-haired substance. In any case, having the property of some hair rather than being completely bald or blonde, brunette, red hair are all purely accidental. In the same way, relative to the essence of being a blonde, short-haired substance, the property of being fair-haired is essential, while relative to the substance of being a fair-haired human being or a fair-haired thing, the property of being platinum blonde or dishwater blonde in particular are all accidental. The distinction between essential and accidental properties of substances go hand in hand with systematic ambiguities in the applications of the concept of substance itself and the precise ways in which substances are specified. Aristotle is sensitive to the nuances of language in determining the possibilities and requires the principles of his metaphysics to reflect these differences. Aristotle introduces the distinction between essence and accident by comparing the accidental properties of a substance to the chance occurrences that are more familiarly spoken of as accidents. Relative to the pursuit of a given purpose, his first example is that of something finding a treasure by accident while gardening. Part of that makes such an event an accident is that there is no necessary connection between digging a hole to plant a tree and coming upon a buried treasure. It does not follow generally or naturally upon opening a patch of ground for the sake of planting a tree that one happens to locate hidden valuables. We certainly cannot count on finding treasure whenever we dig up a garden. It might happen, but more often it is likely not to happen. Moreover, in Aristotle's remarks, if it were true that we frequently find a treasure when digging in on the earth, we would not generally be planting when engaged in such an activity, but would instead, as a matter of fact, be eventually digging up for treasure. Who would dare plant if they would become millionaires by finding a treasure? Let's look at page 150 and color green. What pertains to something and what it is true to assert of it, but neither necessary nor for the most part. Example, someone is digging a trench for a plant and finds a treasure. This finding of the treasure is an accident for the man who digs the trench. It is not the case that finding treasure necessarily comes from or after digging a trench, nor would one, for the most part, in doing some planting, find treasure. Another example is a musician happens to be white. This does not happen either of necessity or for the most part, and so we might say that it is an accident. In keeping, of course, with this distinction between the existence of substances and the subsistence of predicables, Aristotle maintains that accidental as well as essential properties inhere in the substances of which they are truly predicated. He refers to the ambiguity we have described in distinguishing between the essential and accidental properties of a substance relative to the precise ways in which a substance might be characterized. Here, he appeals to another example of accident in the ordinary non-metaphysical sense of accident, and now it's in color blue. So given that things have features and that some features belong to certain things in certain places and at certain times, anything that is a feature but not of something because it is that thing or because the time is now or the place is here will be an accident. This also has the consequence that there is indeed no defined cause for the accidental, but only a chance, and therefore indefinite cause. It was an accident, for instance, for someone to go to Aegina, just in case he did not set out to get there, but was driven there by a storm or kidnapped by pirates. The accident has been produced or has being not qua itself, but qua something else. It was the storm. That was the cause of his coming to a place for which he did not set out. Aristotle considers the accidental color of a substance when the substance is appropriately distinguished in color neutral terms. He distinguishes between substances and predicables, which is to say between the existence of a primary substance and the subsistence of or inherence in a primary substance of a predicable definition or even of a secondary substance. He illustrates this more clearly, but metaphysically, in his distinction between white man and the predicable, the being of a white man. And we can see that on 1031 alpha, or in this text, page 185. It's in the yellow bold in front of you, and let's read that. This question is not without a certain bearing on our investigation concerning substance. It is, after all, widely held that a particular thing is not anything other than its own substance. And what it was to be that thing is being taken to be the substance of each particular. Well, in the case of things accidentally predicated, it would be generally agreed that they are different. So, for example, a white man would be different from what it is to be a white man. If they were the same, then to be a man and to be a white man would also be the same. After all, it's argued a man and a white man are the same thing, so that to be a white man must also be the same as to be a man. On the other hand, it is perhaps not necessary that things that are accidentally the same should be the same. It is not, for instance, in this way that the extremities become the same. And yet, it might be held to turn out that the extremities become accidentally the same, in the same way as to be white and to be musical. However, this is not what is in fact thought. Aristotle argues that the existence of substance is indifferent to its qualification by reference to its accidental properties when the substance is indifferent, or as he puts it, passive with respect to its accidents. As a rule, Aristotle observes, we cannot identify a substance with its accidents. If we overlook the accidental skin color or gender of a person as a human being, then there is no harm philosophically in saying, as we might do when we are speaking non-technically, that the substance of a white man is identical with the substance of a human being. The main point Aristotle wants to make in these difficult passages concerning the multiple senses in which substance, essence, and accident are applied is that substances are generally identified by reference to their essential properties rather than in terms of their detachable accidental properties. He collects the main points of his distinction between the essential and accidental properties of primary and secondary substance in this quote, 1031b to 1032a. Let's read this very long quote, which is in color blue in front of you. With, however, the thing that is spoken of as an accidental property, it would be incorrect to claim that the thing itself and the what it was to be that thing are the same. This is because there is here a double reference. For both, that to which white say is accidental and the accidental property are white, with the result that in one way the thing and what it was to be that thing are the same, and in another way they are not. For the what it was to be that thing or something white is not the same as the what it was to be that thing of a man or of a white man, but it is the same as that of the property of being white. The absurdity of denying the identity can be made clear just by the move of giving a name to each what it was to be that thing. For in this case, there will be another what it was to be that thing in addition to the original what it was to be that thing. For instance, the what it was to be that thing, of course, will have its own what it was to be that thing, but even without this expedient, what is to stop some things just from being straight off the what it was to be that thing for them, if we grant that the what it was to be that thing is the substance, nor indeed is it simply a matter of them being the same. More to the point, the account of each is the same, as even the present arguments have shown, for it is not accidental that one and what it was to be one are one. There is also the point that distinguishing them will produce a regress for the what it was to be the thing or what will be one thing and one the other, so that the same account can be given of these resultants. Our conclusion is as follows. With things that are primary and spoken of per se, the what it was to be the thing and the thing itself are one and the same. Sophistical attempts to unseat this conclusion can patently be thwarted by deploying the same arguments as with the issue whether Socrates and what it was to be Socrates are the same. The basis for tactical counter questions is the same, and indeed for triumphant refutation of their gambits. The distinction between essential and accidental properties makes it possible to describe conditions under which an entity can persist through a change in its accidental properties, while remaining the same by not changing any of its essential properties. There are several important conclusions to be derived from Aristotle's exposition for the metaphysics of change. We can summarize the significance of Aristotle's philosophy in the following first principles of first philosophy. 1. A substance is a combination of form and matter or is an informed matter. 2. There are many different senses in which different kinds of categories of substances need to be distinguished. 3. Principally, there is a distinction between primary and secondary substances. Primary substances are entities that exist in their own right and are not predicated of any other thing. Secondary substances are the properties of primary and other secondary substances, also known as predicables, that are truly predicated of or attributed to primary and other secondary substances, and that inhere or subsist in the substances and ultimately in the primary substances of which they are truly predicated or to which they are truly attributed. Fourth, primary substances exist primarily, which is to say independently of any of their particular properties. Primary substances must have their some inhering secondary substances and cannot exist without any properties, as what are sometimes called bare particulars. Secondary substances, by contrast, subsist only in the primary substances in which they inhere and are incapable of independent existence without or in the absence of primary substances. 5. Secondary substances are distinguished into two categories of essential and accidental properties. Essential properties are those without which a substance cannot exist, as a particular kind of substance it is, but is corrupted or destroyed as the kind of thing it has been if deprived of any of its essential properties, while accidental properties can be added to or eliminated from a substance without destroying it, resulting only in an alteration of the substance's conditions. And lastly, sixth, the distinction between essential and accidental properties is systematically ambiguous in precisely the same way and number of ways as substance. The identity conditions for a substance persisting through change are thereby equated with its essence or set of essential properties. The problem of change is addressed by Aristotle within the framework of these principles of first philosophy. Aristotle argues that change can affect either the essential or accidental properties of substances, respectively corrupting or merely altering the substance. Things do not always remain the same through change. It depends on the kind of things we are talking about and the kind of change. Some things survive change, persisting or continuing to exist with their identities intact when only their accidental properties are altered. Aristotle's answer to the problem of change is complicated, but in many ways affirms common sense judgments about the kind of changes a sensible, movable, physical entity is capable of doing. The question that remains is how essential properties are more exactly to be characterized. What is needed in order for a property to be essential rather than accidental? If Aristotle said only that the substance's essential properties are those that cannot be changed without destroying the substance, and that accidental properties are properties that by the same standard are not essential, or those that can be changed without destroying but merely altering a substance, then his solution to the problem of understanding the persistence of some things through some kinds of change would be viciously circular. Aristotle would then be saying that substances can persist through change in their accidental properties without loss of identity, because accidental properties are those properties through changes of which a substance can persist without loss of identity. The way out of this circle for Aristotle is found in the fact that he offers an independent analysis of the concept of a substance's essential properties as its natural function. What is Aristotle's theory of natural function is the next video in this series. Thank you for subscribing, liking, and sharing this video. This keeps the channel alive. And this is still Samo't Sari sa Simula. Thank you very much.